Hello friends, today we're going to be talking about that opposition between Venus and Saturn, Venus in its own sign of Libra and Saturn debilitated in the sign of Aries. This transit will perfect at 14 degrees on August 21st. And when we look at this transit, there's something poetic here because Saturn is in the sign of Aries. It's looking across the zodiac to the sign of Libra where Saturn's actually exalted. This is almost as if Saturn's recalling, because of his retrograde motion too, of the times of life where things were exalted. And all of it while he's feeling weak, worn out, because Saturn's powerless, so it struggles in the sign of Aries. That's what the debilitation is. So there's a sense of longing here right now, that Saturn archetype within us for the good old times, for example, where things were a little bit easier. And at the same time, while Saturn's looking at the sign of Libra, now Venus has arrived in her full glory because Venus is so dignified in its own sign, especially in the sign of Libra. Saturn's looking at itself and it's like, I have so much capacity and capability, but I feel debilitated. I can't express myself. And then it's looking at Venus. She in her full glory with the full ability to have a full expression of its own nature, which exasperates this feeling of almost inadequacy, that Saturn archetype within. But I do want us to remember this. I don't want to build the wrong image here because in planetary friendships, Venus and Saturn are good friends. So this is not looking back with resentment or jealousy. It's more about a conversation between two old friends. One who's in a very good situation with the capacity to give very good advice, which is Venus. And the other one is a friend that's struggling in this moment of life. And in this dialogue, what Venus wants to convey to the Saturn within us is that, yes, you're figuring out the art of suffering, the art of achieving and acting no matter how hard things get in life. But there's this other art in this world, which is the art of enjoyment and pleasure. So Venus wants to teach Saturn something here. This is going to be the context of our video today. But before getting into the depth of that, I just want to let you know what's coming up. The next video will be about the lunar eclipse in the sign of Virgo. And of course, there's that Mars square Saturn video coming up where both of them are debilitated and Mars is the ruler of Aries. So that one should be very interesting. And if you want to catch these videos and more, please do remember to subscribe, press that notification bell so YouTube notifies you when those videos are released. And let's get into the layers of this video. And just for context, I'm going to talk a little bit about Saturn and Aries first. And I want us to remember, Aries is a fire cardinal sign. It wants to initiate the motion of life. And because it's a fire sign, it's related to Dharma. So it wants to set things into motion with a sense of purpose. And we have to remember the sign of Aries is like a quick combustion. So everything happens very fast. So we're talking about decisiveness here, being first. But when we consider the nature of Saturn, it can't be more different because Saturn is about slowing everything down, the slowest planet. Saturn always needs more time. So it's like we get false ignition here. Aries doesn't think about consequences. Saturn is all about slow down. Think about this. Is this logical? Is this rational? What are the consequences of this? And Aries has a sense of impatience to it. It doesn't want to repeat things. It doesn't want repetition in life. It's an explorer. It's an adventurer. It's a pioneer. Saturn's like, no, repeat the same old thing again and again. So Saturn's bringing its limitations into the sign of Aries and it's asking it for a lot of endurance. And Saturn, the Saturn archetype within us that has the capacity to endure, is getting super exhausted here too because Saturn's debilitated. So Saturn doesn't have the same forbearance as its usual self either. And again, going back to that concept of Dharma, Aries finds its Dharma and its sense of purpose through acting, through initiating. It moves forward. And if it stays in the right trajectory, then it's serving its purpose and is doing the right thing. But with Saturn here, it's like every time we start something, we meet some sort of a resistance. So it's like, am I even doing the right thing? Is this what I'm supposed to be doing in life? Is this the right path for me? So Saturn's bringing so much impotency into our action. So instead of moving forward, we're forced to constantly retry. In that sense, Saturn's creating this feeling of failure within us. Like, I'm not moving anywhere. What am I acting towards? So instead of moving forward, Saturn's constantly asking us to structure some old, worn out aspect of our life. And look at where the sign of Aries is sitting in your chart. It's talking about that house, the themes of that house, the people pertaining to that house. So that is what Saturn's challenging in this moment. With Saturn here in the past 15 months, we've had to try and retry so many times. And look at people who have the sign of Saturn. I mean, they have Saturn in the sign of Aries. One of the qualities that you'll find about them, they can be very successful too, but they have this capacity and audacity to keep retrying after a failure. Oh my God, someone's mowing their lawn. I'm going to close the window. One moment. I'm going to boil to death. I'll be right back. So yeah, you look at people with Saturn in the sign of Aries, they have this capacity to try and retry. Tony Hawk, if you're a skateboarder, good God, like you're going to keep doing this trick that you're trying to get straight. You're going to fall, you're going to injure yourself, but do you have that capacity to get up again after that false ignition and try again? Saturn's been doing this for the past 15 months. It's been exhausting. And this is why I made that video about Saturn in the sign of Aries is about suffering. And the point of it becomes about learning how to suffer, what we're suffering for, to suffer in a purposeful manner. Because with Saturn here, we keep trying and there can be this perpetual feeling of failure. So we're constantly asking ourselves, what am I building? Like, what exactly am I being held responsible for? Is it worth continuing and just keep going? I know we can start coming against this question of, if this is really my purpose, why is it that the universe is not supporting me? So there's this feeling of just feeling dirty, feeling grimy, feeling exhausted. It's just not a good feeling that we have been grappling with for the past 15 months. So now Venus coming across as an opposition to Saturn, the loveliest planet, the most gracious, with the know-how of implementing the art of life in terms of having pleasure, is going to have a dialogue with this cranky Saturn, with that part of us that is completely exhausted and might even be feeling a little lost, little depressed, little down. But before going into that dialogue, I want to say something about the sign of Libra and Venus in Libra. So the sign of Aries, I was just saying, is about Dharma, is about understanding what you're made of, and based on that, knowing the trajectory of your actions in this life and what it is that you're supposed to do. And to do that is to have a sense of purpose. But the goal of life in the sign of Libra is actually Kama, is not Dharma. And Kama is a very important facet of life. It's about the pleasure principle. It's about things that bring us a sense of joy and happiness. It's about fulfillment of desires, the joy that we get from love, from relationship, from the material aspects of life, from the sensual engagement. The five senses bring us a lot of joy. It's what makes life feel exhilarating and alive. So Kama becomes about our capacity to enjoy life and to enjoy existence as a participant within it. And we have to remember Venus itself is the principle of attraction, now in a Kama sign. So we can see this need now for wanting to have some joy, some beauty. We want to feel good in this moment. So while Saturn's debilitated in the sign of Aries with the weight of Dharma and existence on his shoulders, Venus is coming in and saying, we got to learn how to enjoy life as well. And I think this Venus has a much louder voice than Saturn in this opposition, because Saturn's debilitated. That's leaving Saturn a little powerless in terms of being assertive. It's so bombarded by its own things in that house that it's having a hard time dictating something right now to Venus that is so dignified and so powerful. So Venus here right now is louder and it's more assertive in terms of what it has to say. It makes more sense to us, actually. And what Venus is saying to Saturn is very simple. Venus is looking at his good friend and is like, you've forgotten what it means to actually live. But this is Venus. There's graciousness. So the Venus archetype of existence right now is acknowledging our suffering. It's saying, yes, there's a lot of work to be done. There's a reason why you have arrived to this point of life. Yes, there are responsibilities to fulfill. Yes, there are difficulties that cannot be avoided. There are things that are worth sacrificing for. And all of it requires your quality, Saturn, discipline, patience, and years of effort. But life has to remain alive for you to do all of these things. Venus is saying to Saturn, how are you going to fulfill your Dharma when your cup is getting empty? Venus is reminding the Saturn within us, you have to do something to have some sense of fullness in life, to be able and to have that capacity to just keep on going, especially in the sign of Aries that just initiates. So Venus is saying everything that you're doing right now, much appreciated by existence. But what you're aiming for in this moment, Saturn, is impossible. If life cannot sustain itself, why are you doing what you're doing? And if we think about it, part of the sustainment of life is to have a sense of enjoyment. One has to feel oneself as someone that has vitality. Sometimes, a lot of times, our sense of purpose comes, the measure of it at least comes from knowing that even though I'm going through this hardship, even though life is so hard right now, the underlying current beneath it is joy, is bringing me fulfillment and happiness. But if that disappears, why are you suffering? Why are you trying? This is what Venus is trying to show us. Venus is saying, don't shun the feel that comes from fulfilling one's desires. Sometimes that's the only thing that we have to keep ourselves full enough to continue pushing, moving, and enduring towards that dharmic path. This is why there are 4 goals of life, not just one. We got Dharma, Artha, Kama, and Moksha. They're all contingent on each other. This is what's required for one to live a full life, to live a full expression of their life. And Dharma is about our sense of purpose. Artha is about building wealth in this life and having the material aspects. Kama is about the enjoyment of it. And moksha is ultimately about transcendence of all of these conditions, but only because these 3 conditions were fulfilled. So Venus right now is telling Saturn, austerity for austerity's sake doesn't make sense. It's counterproductive to life itself. Is reminding Saturn, and Saturn right now, for those of you who are familiar with the nakshatras, is in the nakshatra of Revati, which has a lot to do with nourishment. I've already made a video about this. Is reminding Saturn that you need nourishment, you need rest. Life works through these intervals. You yourself are the reality principle. You cannot violate that reality. Venus is saying we all need beauty. We all need touch, sensual pleasures, companions in this life. You can't do everything alone and carry this weight on your back alone. Because the sign of Aries is very individualistic too. It's like, I'll do it myself. I can get it done best. I can do it first. So it might reject other people. Venus is reminding it right now, you need other people. So Venus is reality testing Saturn in some ways right now. It's poking it and it's like, are you even alive? Can you sense this? Can you sense the world around you? Because if not, you're actually dead. And it's telling Saturn, if you feel dead, dead things don't even need to have a dharma. So Venus right now is reminding Saturn of the importance of quality of life. Because Saturn by itself can just become this cold, objective measurement of efficiency in the sign of Aries. And who cares if you're being efficient and there's quantity, but there's no quality? So in some ways, Venus is asking Saturn, are you truly actually performing your role in this life? And the way to know that you're performing your role in life and for life is to be participating in life, augmenting life. You rendering yourself half dead is not fulfilling your purpose, is not living with dharma, is not being moral. Because all that's going to happen is that you're going to get sick and then you're going to become someone else's responsibility, for example. So what kind of responsibility was that in the first place? Simply, Venus wants to let Saturn know, yes, life is difficult. I acknowledge it, my friends. They are friends. You are the one who bears the weight of existence and you keep everything together. But life must also be enjoyed. That's also a principle in life. And I want to go back to an idea that I brought up at the beginning of the video where Saturn's looking across the zodiac into the sign of Libra, where it's exalted. And I think it's worth taking a moment to look at why is Saturn exalted there symbolically, because there's astronomical reasons for it too. I think this will help us understand this dialogue in this transit. And I think one way to understand the exaltation of Saturn there is to understand the nature of Libra itself. Libra is about balance and equality. It's about the right proportion of things. Like in this sign, yes, there is the self, but there's also the other. The desire of the self exists in the sign of Libra, but so does the cooperation and the compromise we need to have as an individual to be able to have a relational dynamic with someone else. In the sign of Libra, you can definitely declare that I want this. But your wanting is not the only thing. There's a large structure that is holding multitude of wants, and they can all exist at the same time. So Libra is showing us that the nature of existence, some components of it, requires us to be in relational dynamic with other people. The self must come to interact with the other. And Saturn understands this really well. Saturn's actually democratic, and Saturn is about people is power for the people, by the people. And if you think about it, Saturn is about building structures that can bind things and hold things in a parameter throughout time. This is what marriage is, right? Marriage becomes a structure that binds those people, rules of conduct that holds people throughout time. If we were to put, let's say, Libra in the 7th house of marriage in the natural zodiac. And if you think about it, whatever that survives time in our reality is that thing that has a capacity to come into relation with other facets of life and understands the proportionality of it, so it maintains its relationality. Saturn in Libra becomes very balanced in a sense of it's not just asking, what can I take? It's also asking, what can I give? It's not asking, how are you going to sustain me? But it's going to ask, how can I also sustain this? It brings that equality component of Libra into the forefront. And Saturn represents boundaries and limitations, right? So it doesn't just say what belongs to me, but it also wants to know what belongs to you, what is rightfully yours. What's fair? What's reciprocal? Saturn asks, what can this relationship realistically entail and hold? In many ways, Saturn becomes exalted in the sign of Libra because Libra gives it a reference point and a context where Saturn can now build its structures around it. And the reference point that Libra is bringing is other people. And Saturn in Aries is debilitated. It has no reference point. All it has is itself. This is a very individualistic sign. Saturn in Aries is consumed with the burden of individual becoming. And I don't know about you guys, but if I sit here and think about myself all day long, what it is that I want to do, how it is that I feel, by the end of the day, I feel like an insane person. I am drained. But the moment a friend calls me and my attention is diverted from myself to them, and I'm placing my care over there, suddenly my problems don't become so big. It doesn't matter. So this is something that Venus is also showing Saturn right now. Maybe you've become a little too self-focused. Maybe this is why you can't have a sense of enjoyment. Saturn has lost its reference point in terms of being about other people. Saturn is about sacrifice. That's the archetype of Saturn within us. In the sign of Aries, I just want to sacrifice for myself. And I want to even sacrifice you so that I can achieve my goals. These kinds of things in the long run of life bring suffering, especially for us human beings because we are social beings. Like with Saturn and Aries in the past 15 months, there could have been this notion of my way, my goals, my life, my pain, all the things that have happened to me through all these years. Well, you were not the only person in that story. This is something to remember. We have shared every step of our lives with different facets of life and with different people. But in the sign of Aries, we can become very self-focused about it. And with Saturn here is all about my struggles. So we're kind of going nuts from being so self-focused. And Venus is coming now in opposition and saying, maybe not all of it should be about you. Venus is coming in and telling us, you have all become so self-focused that you're collapsing on yourself. Venus is reminding Saturn that you're the planet of the people and about the masses. You have no idea what you're doing to yourself right now. Be about other people. Bring yourself into relation with other components of life that has nothing to do with you anymore. And you know what? We do want Saturn's gaze distributed amongst the many. Saturn has the cruelest gaze from all the planets. Right now in the sign of Aries, we are casting that Saturnine gaze onto ourselves. That focalized gaze of Saturn on one person is a lot. We should be grateful that Saturn is about the masses, is distributing the struggle and the pain also, because it's looking at everybody equally. And Venus is telling Saturn, you know what? Everything might feel solo right now. But the reality of things, where again, you yourself are the reality principle, the self exists in a living field of relationships and experiences. And if you're going to isolate it like that and live in a vacuum, you will continue suffering. Venus is saying to the Saturn within us, maybe the way out is not to do everything with your own worn out hands. Maybe you just need to connect to something or someone beyond yourself right now. And Venus is also reminding Saturn that suffering without love doesn't really have a meaning. sacrifice without having that kind of a value that comes out of love, at the end of the day, just becomes something harmful. It's life negating. Venus itself has a lot to do with value, things that are valuable to us, hence the sign of Taurus. So Venus is reminding Saturn, yes, commit, endure, but cultivate what matters. And I think when we understand that, we understand the difference between pure suffering and devotion, because devotion requires some suffering, because it requires a lot of sacrifice, commitment to things where you might want to go somewhere else and do something else. Devotion is the act of showing up every day to give of oneself. So there's sacrifice, there's endurance, and all of these are a form of suffering, and they're actually Saturnine qualities in a lot of ways. But in devotion, there's love. In pure suffering, there is no love. It's brutal. It's cruel. We call that torture. So Venus is also reminding Saturn, like, all the stuff that you're doing right now, there has to be some devotion in it. And I would say because of all of these factors, Venus is coming in and is trying to show us that there is love inside of things that you're experiencing, and you got to know how to tap into it. And honestly, guys, that is sometimes so small in this life. For me personally, there's been days in my life that have turned into weeks or even months while I'm walking somewhere, and my body might even be in pain. But the very fact that I can walk, the very fact that I can think about my pain, these are themselves blessings that shouldn't be taken for granted. Me having the ability to move this finger like this, if you were to see how much mechanism and coordination is behind this, is insane. All I need is to have this finger broken, and all of these blessings of life are taken away in an instant. Venus right now wants us to acknowledge what is good, and it might be small, but that's where the joy lies. Is to maybe look at another person's happiness. Today I was driving down the street and I saw this young couple standing at an intersection kissing. And that is a beautiful thing in this world. Two people are showing affection for each other. It might not be the lot of some of us right now, but the fact that it exists in this world, the fact that that joy exists in this world, we can have a sense of joy about it too. Sometimes our joy can feel that distance, but if we can see it and acknowledge it, it becomes personal and it sits in the heart and we can feel it. So Venus is telling Saturn right now, there are these joys, even in these moments that are so difficult, and you need to start acknowledging it, because life is becoming empty. Life is losing its joy. And when life gets to that point, it's very difficult to replenish it and to just keep moving forward. And I think in this moment, Venus is trying to show us what happens to Dharma as a goal of life when it excludes or negates Kama, which is pleasure, which is when discipline becomes a pure grinding down process with Saturn in Mars' sign. Instead of discipline being something that is constantly realigning our compass back to our sense of purpose. And when we keep doing this, when we keep forcing life into place and we can't see the joy of life, the pleasure of life, the pleasure of being alive, we lose the point of life in general. Venus wants to remind us, don't be so concerned where life is going, how you want to direct it. Because we'll keep trying and retrying because we're trying to direct life somewhere, right? But Venus is saying, stop, pause, smell the roses, watch life happening as it's happening right now. Venus is telling Saturn, you cannot maintain the Dharma of the sign of Aries through pure force, because that is violating the integrity of life. Yes, life has some components of force in it, but life also flows like water. You're acting like a dam right now. That kind of extreme is in opposition to life. And Venus is saying that having pleasure in life is not a distraction to our sense of purpose. Sometimes it's pleasure that gives us the capacity to be able to fulfill it. And that's because pleasure is usually telling us that we've been restored, we've had enough rest, that we are resting, that we are nourishing ourselves. And these are very important components of life. The way I would interpret this Venus is that take an evening this week, do nothing. And maybe that's on the 21st when this perfects. Enjoy life. Be present with what you're eating, with to whom you're speaking to. Just sense it. Venus represents the 5 senses. Let yourself get replenished. And I want to bring something else to your attention about Venus. Venus is about something that is so much more important and yet so much more subtle than just pleasure. Because in the Vedantic tradition, Venus is related to this concept that's called Rasa. And translation of Rasa could be something like taste, but it's talking about existence itself has a taste. It's something that can be tasted. There's like a juice of life that flows through existence, or existence has its juice of life running through life, that we can taste this, we can experience this. It's what brings vitality into life. When we say, I have a lived experience of something, we're talking about that flavor of life, that taste of life. So rasa is not enjoyment in a superficial sense. It's the distilled emotional flavor of reality itself. So it's like the sweetness of love, the ache of longing, whether if it's for a person or whether if it's for your God. It's the tenderness that you feel when someone's compassionate towards you. Even the intensity of courage is talking about that flavor of reality, of life. It has a particular feeling, it has a particular sensation. It's the stillness and peace, the wonder of beauty. When you go into nature and you see something magnificent, you're tasting something about nature. You're tasting something about the nature of yourself as the experiencer of it. You're experiencing something alive. That's the taste. Even sorrow, even sadness makes life feel real. They all have a taste and a flavor. Venus represents this concept of rasa. So to experience rasa is to be moved by life. It's not just about observing it objectively and coldly calling the facts that this is this, this is that. It's like poetry. It's about us feeling life moving through us in all of its colors and all of its intensity. And for us to feel life as it's moving. Life in itself is a form of motion. It's this that allows us to feel its range, and it's related to Venus. And I want us to remember, without this notion of rasa, even the most meaningful dharma will just become dry, tasteless, senseless. There's no feeling about it. So how are you going to serve it when you get to that point? Like, the point of dharma is actually for you to enact your nature because you're maintaining and upholding the law of nature itself by you being yourself. But then if it's dry and it's losing its liveliness, how are you supposed to do that? You're actually violating this order of existence. So Venus right now is looking at the Saturn within us, the Saturn that has taken home in our being. And it's saying that your life can't just be about some sort of an optimization here right now. Just keep trying to optimize these structures, keep doing it and redoing it till you get it right. That act of doing in itself is something that should be tasted. It's like right now, Saturn and Aries just create this bitter, pungent taste where you just want to spit it out. You don't want to have that experience. Venus is saying, find the fulfillment in that act. And this is super important for us to realize right now, because one of the things with Saturn and Aries, because it's an action-oriented sign and it's an individualistic kind of a sign, we feel like we're under pressure to make something of our lives right now. We have to prove that our effort is going somewhere. But if we lose this rasa, we lose the substance. And what I mean by that, the path is not even worth walking on. The destination is not worth its arrival. And Venus, in a sense, right now is saying, I want you to pause and actually feel where you are. It's not that bad. Even if externally you haven't arrived to the destination of that material component of your life, man, take a little stock from 20 years ago, 10 years ago. You are more wise. You actually have the capacity and the capability to see more things, to feel more things. Take note of that. That is something worthy. Take note of the things that are actually beautiful. Every day you might taste at least one thing that you enjoy. Taste it. Take pleasure in it. Remember that life still exists. The beauty of life is still there. It's being negated in you, but the beauty and the pleasure and the joy is in life. The question is, can you taste it? Can you pause long enough to taste it? So this Venus is actually coming in as an opposition to inform us of beauty of life still exists. The beauty within you still exists, but perhaps just a different kind of a perspective and context is needed right now. And I think some of that will come not through pushing to have more pleasure, but to pause, to rest, take that intentional moment to taste something. Don't watch something and eat something, for example, because you're losing the full spectrum and experience of seeing, and you're losing the full spectrum, that sensation of eating. Both of these things are senses, and they're both related to Venus as the five senses. But Venus right now is reminding that Saturn that's just been suffering for the past 15 months, understand what it means to be alive, because you have been suffering so much that you might be losing that sense. And oppositions can create a tension point in a sense that if we don't have a maturity, we're going to gravitate too much towards Saturn or too much towards Venus. The point is to have them come into a dialogue so we have a full expression of this spectrum from Aries to Libra, from everything that Saturn represents to everything that Venus represents. I hope this video has been helpful. And before closing the video, I would like to ask you to please like, share, and subscribe. And please do comment. Let me know what this past 15 months have been like for you. What do you do every day to take pleasure in the joy of life and to feel the joy of it? How do you create that intentional pause to stop this process of, I got to become something, I got to get somewhere, I got to get this thing done, to actually like, wait a minute, I'm going to stop here for a second and I'm going to actually enjoy this. Things you do for rest and recuperation, R&R. How do you take care of yourself? These are very important themes, and I'd love to know how you're negotiating with it, what it is that you actually do as a method for yourself. These are super important things in life, these practical components. We can actually help each other to understand these things and how to do it. So I'd greatly appreciate it if you share your experiences, and if you want a reading of this transit, the upcoming transits, or just to understand your birth chart in terms of what has it been all about. Where are you? Where are you going? What has been the purpose of all of it? You can go to my website for more information, or you can email me. My email is in the description box of this video and every video on this channel. And I think it's now time to close. So I want to say that the way I'm reading the transits, this opposition, it's much larger than just relationships. You're going to have a conflict in a relationship. This is a conversation between purpose of life and the pleasure of being alive. This is a question between what life is constantly asking of us and what it is we require to constantly give back to life. Like, yeah, we'll continue to strive. We'll continue taking responsibility for life. Yes, we'll stand and we'll fight all the difficulties. We will fail, we will bear, but somewhere within all of that, the play of life is still occurring. And if we zoom out of our own individual life, even in our greatest moment of suffering, we'll come to see that two lovers come and they meet for the first time. There's beauty and grandeur in that. A child is born, a friendship is made, forgiveness is granted, freedom is earned. That is the Rasa of life that's flowing through life at all times. And even if we're not the recipient of it in that moment, we're not the one who's getting the freedom, we're not the one who's getting the lover, it's still worth seeing it, knowing it, feeling it, sensing it. It's worth our admiration and our love. And sometimes in life, this is how participation and joy begins. Our life could be going through such a hard and a tumultuous moment that we can't see the joy in our own life. I was saying, if we look closely enough, there is. Because in that moment of suffering, all that is needed is for the pipe to also burst, for your back to have a spasm, for you to get your hand cut off. Your life just went from bad to very, very bad. So a lot of things are working. There is blessings. There are things to be happy about. But even if we can't see it, if we just take our own gaze off of ourselves for a moment and pay attention to what is around us, life is full of joy. As much as it has suffering, as much as it has its cruelty, there's a lot of beautiful things simultaneously happening. In fact, I would say life prefers joy to the hardship, even though both are part and parcel with it. And I want you to think about this. For every one person that dies, 2 people are born. That's every second. And nature is the greatest accountant. And it's saying that the joy of giving life is a priority to the death. Could have kept it at 1-to-1 ratio, but no. But seriously, sometimes just paying attention, participating in life, that's where the light of joy can start to enter. And it's not what happens to us personally, but it's through the mere act of recognition of it in another that it reminds us that we have this capacity, and that capacity can then open the doorway for us to see the joy within our own life and start to work with it as an ingredient of our life. This is the blessing of Venus right now. And I also want us to think about this. Sometimes karma is the way for us to realign ourselves back to our Dharma. And that's because purpose of life can't be separated from our capacity to love life, which means to love being alive. Like if you want to do well in life, you cannot hate life and expect life to be kind to you or expect yourself to do well in life. We take care of what we love, and life is something that needs to be loved if we want to have an experience of it that is of joy, happiness, and growth. So Dharma is giving our life a sense of direction, but it's karma that gives us the desire to continue moving through it. And that's because we love it, because we take pleasure in it. And if you think about it, there is no higher purpose that we can serve when it is an act of love. Whether if that's love for the divine, love for your career, love for your children, love for your partner, it's the act of love that makes it noble, that makes it consistent, that makes it enduring, which brings Saturn into the sign of Libra and eventually Exalted. And this brings us to the end of the video. So I guess my only closing remark for this video is to understand what is worth loving and what is worth enjoying, regardless of how difficult life in this moment might be. And that's it for today. Sending you much love. Till next time.